Hello, welcome to the Wildline podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today is the weekend review show for September 6th through the 8th, 2019. We have one new wide release this weekend. It was It Chapter 2. It did quite well. This one is from Warner Brothers New Line. That was number one this weekend. We will walk also through the top 10. And we'll talk a lot about what's happening at the film festivals, Venice, Telluride, and this weekend, I think through this week, is Toronto. We have a really good read now on what's going to be award contending films and also what might break out of the box office from these sort of more arty films. But let's walk through the top 10 for the weekend. Of course, number one was It Chapter 2, although below what we had expected for the weekend. My expectation last week was that, okay, I felt like the hype was back on for Chapter 2 of It. And remember, the original opened up 2 years ago, 2017, this same post-Labor Day time slot. And that one did $123 million of the weekend. And I think I did like a whole show about how amazing that was. But as someone who, if you follow box office, it's a huge amount. But like if you compare it to a comic book movie, it's like, whatever. But I think the real context here that makes it an amazing achievement for it to open over $120 million in the domestic box office is that it's a rated R, hard rated R horror movie. We've never had that ever happen before. Nothing even really close. If you look at the top 10 or top 5 rated R horror movies, they're all in like the last 3 to 4 years. So there's something that's dramatically shifted in the industry, and it is really sort of the tip of the spear of that. And so with It Chapter 2 coming out this year, 2 years later, we have a great cast. Jessica Chastain, Bill Hader is the older sort of losers club. And so this one, phasers were set to hype on this. And I think everybody sort of knew that going into this weekend. It was a quiet end of the summer like it always is. I mean, what did we have over the last couple of weeks? Good Boys, Angel Has Fallen? Not really much. The last really big movie we had come out was in the beginning of August, which would have been Fast and the Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw. And so we haven't had a huge blockbuster. And so It Chapter 2 is going to sort of take up that mantle. And I think the expectation here, tracking was looking about 85 to 95 in that range. I think everybody thought it was going to go much higher than that. I think over 100 was the agreed upon number that sort of all the analysts and box office nerds like myself were thinking about. The real question, I think, for most of us was, is It Chapter 2 going to hit that 123 mark like the original did? Going like 2-3 weeks ago, I said probably not. But going into this week, it felt like the marketing hit me, and it felt like everybody's talking about it. Younger people were really hyped on it. So I said 125, and I was really wrong. So It Chapter 2 officially is coming in at $91 million for the weekend, which, on the face of it's fantastic, but contextually to the expectations and what the last film did, it's a little bit of an underperformance. And I think the legs are going to suffer a bit. We'll get into why a little bit later. But $91 million within the context of the expectation from the first one and just what we feel like is successful at the box office nowadays, it is a little bit of an underperformance. The fact that they couldn't hit $100 million is not great for a film like this. Did it cost a lot? No. But the expectation and narrative was there that this was on the same level of performance as the first one, and it's not going to be. Maybe internationally, and we'll talk about that too, it can make up some of that cash, but right now it's definitely going to come in pretty significantly below the first one. But if you took a step back and just said, hey, there's a rated R horror movie coming out in September, it opens at $91 million, you would be ecstatic. You'd be like, that's an amazing grand slam. What a victory for Warner Brothers and everybody involved. In this case, it's kind of both of those things. This is a really big achievement to have a second horror movie open in this range in September, which is essentially, I always call the end of August the gutter slot. September's like the gutter month for the most part. Like nothing really happens in September. October is a totally different story. It reminds me a lot of like a mid-January to mid-February time slot. Everybody's going back to school, everybody's going back to work, they're coming back from vacation. Europe takes off the entire month of August anyway. So people are coming back, but it's just quiet and people are busy doing other things. So September, having something open over $50 million in September is a big deal, but almost hitting $100 million is awesome. But again, you got to be of two minds of these things. Again, it's like the expectation was at least 100. Is it going to hit 123? Is it going to hit 150? And then you bring in the context of MCU and comic book movies, and there's a lot of chatter about how long It Chapter 2 is. I think it almost pushes about 3 hours long. But then you compare it to comic book movies, and Avengers Endgame could open to $350 million on a weekend, and it runs for like 3 hours. So it's a really sort of a lot of different sort of narratives happening here. My read on it is this: if I just take a step back from it, this is an awesome achievement for Warner Brothers and for the horror genre at large to have two movies like this back to back open as big as they have. And let's not forget that last year Halloween opened up in that Halloween slot, the reboot. The reason that made, what was it, like 70 something million dollars opening weekend is because of it doing so well. It changed the game for the horror genre, the rated R horror genre specifically. And so It Chapter 2 is just a continuation of that new paradigm that now exists. Now a rated R horror movie can easily make $80 million, $100 million at the box office, and no one's going to blink an eye. Let's do a deeper dive on its performance here. Let's just walk through the numbers day by day compared to the first one. So we had a lower preview here. We knew it was going to be a little bit depressed, $10.5 million versus the $13 million for the original. So right around late Thursday night, we kind of had an idea, okay, it's probably not going to hit what the original did. When the Friday numbers came in, there was a lot of stuff. I mean, this is one of the few times where there's a lot of like inside sources that post on forums for box office. They work in the box office industry. They have a read on the numbers. 10 hours before a newspaper or a deadline reports them. So if you frequent those forums, you get that information pretty early, and they're almost never wrong. In this case, the numbers that were coming in were way off. They were off by like $7 million for what happened on Friday. So the expectation was that this thing was going to push over $40 million on Friday pretty easily. That didn't happen, and that's when we sort of knew, this is going to have trouble hitting $100 million. So did $37 million for Friday. That includes the Thursday previews versus the $50 million for the original. Already it's $13 million behind. Saturday was a little bit better. It was only $11 million down, $33 million for It Chapter 2. The first one did 45. And then the Sunday, they have pretty depressed. They're saying a 40% drop, which makes sense for a whole movie like this. It's probably not a big Sunday matinee film. $20 million is the estimate right now. We'll get actuals tomorrow. I don't think the actuals are going to change that much. They might actually go a little bit up because the drop they have for Sunday is pretty severe. So I think, you're going to end up 91, 92, 93 in that range. And again, it's a great performance, but it's a little bit underwhelming compared to what the first one did. So let's talk about the critics' thought about It Chapter 2. On Rotten Tomatoes, 64% from critics. Top critics gave it a 43%. Not very good for the more seasoned critics. That's not a great sign for legs. Is that discrepancy like a big deal? I think that it is. Top critics tend to have a better read on how society at large is going to interact with the film and respond to it. That's sort of what they're trained to do. If they're giving a 43%, to me, that's like a red flag. Legs are going to be tough. And on top of that, you also have rated R horror film sequel. It has shots going at its legs pretty severe right now. So, what are you looking at? 2.5 maybe for a multiplier? We'll see. You could even see in the post-track surveys. And again, post-track is in person after somebody sees it. I think Thursday night it was about 80%. It dropped 4 points by Saturday. The definite recommend score is the real, I think, the canary in the coal mine for poor legs. It was 62% definite recommend Thursday night, I believe, or was it maybe Friday night? That dropped to 56%, which is not a great definite recommend score. The complaints are very clear. Overly long, has like 3 different endings. The tone's all over the place. I think there are narrative construction problems to it. The acting is supposedly very good. The set pieces are fantastic. It's just the story itself seems muddled and unclear and doesn't have a lot of propulsion to it. I think that's why people are sort of dreading the last hour of this film when they're seeing it. Cinema score is B+, same as the first one. That's not too bad. Actual scores from critics. All critics was 62 out of 100 on Rotten Tomatoes, 58 out of 100 from top critics. Verified audience score was high, 81%, an 82 actual score. All audience was 79% fresh score, 80 actual score. Looking like, let's see, 72 on the Letterboxd score for the first one, only 66 here for the second one. So a little bit more muted response from the film snob, film Twitter crowd. So it's kind of a mixed bag here, not only with the box office performance. I mean, it's successful, right? It's going to be profitable. Deadline says that. Insider sources say this thing's going to be profitable, but it's not going to be nearly as profitable as the first one. And then the audience reactions they're hard to read. The verified audience score is pretty high in the 80s. The cinema score for B+ is not bad. You got to keep in mind that horror movies are also depressed in general in cinema score. They're usually about a half. You have to give like a curve of a half grade to a full grade for a horror movie. So this is more like an A-. But again, what does cinema score do? They do it opening night, Friday night. I think at the 7 o'clock showing in like maybe 12 theaters. So it's a small data size there. The movement on the post track's not great. I think for legs, the original one ended up doing 327, which is an amazing performance overall domestically. And let's not forget the budget on the original was only $35 million. The budget here, I'm hearing 70 million, I think is the source that I have on that. So it's double the cost, at least in the production side of things. Marketing's probably a lot bigger too. But if we're just doing some basic math here, 91 million times a 3x multiple gets us 273. That's not going to happen here. So it's going to be, significantly lower than the first one. I think you're going to be lucky to get a 2.5 out of this, just because the length and the scores aren't as static, and the movement of the post-track score doesn't look great. So right now I'm looking at 227. There's a good chance it ends about $100 million less than the original did, which is, you hear that and you're like, well, that's not a great performance, is it? It's not in that sense, but I think all the financials that go into it make a lot of sense for this to be profitable. Not like a $200 million profit, but maybe like a $50 million profit for Warner Brothers. So it is, and to me, it's a little bit disappointing on that level, but like, who cares? It's a horror movie opened $91 million in September, a hard R movie. I mean, that's amazing. In terms of some other information, exhibitors talked to Deadline and basically said, yeah, the 2-hour, 49-minute running time did prevent them from doing later showings, which really hurt it, especially Friday night. Male, female, 54% male, 46% female, right in line with the average movie. The big number here is 50% under 25. So younger people did show up. The biggest under 25 group was men under 25 at 28%. Women under 25 was at 22%. So I think, they showed up for this, which is, they showed up for the first one too. So it's not that surprising, but I'm just a little bit sort of like, if they showed up, then it was the older people that didn't show up is the reason why this thing didn't hit $100 million. That might be it. Or maybe it's just a lower level of hype. Racial ethnicity breakdown, 47% Caucasian, lower than normal, 26% Hispanic, slightly over-indexed, 14% African-American, a little bit over-indexed, 13% Asian, definitely an over-index from that group of people. Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, where's it going to go? I do think the multiplier is going to be low just because you have the 3 strikes against it. It's a sequel. It's really long. And it's a horror movie. Those things are all negative effect on legs. So I think that's probably going to be the case here with It Chapter 2. And it does have some competition coming up. We have The Goldfinch, probably not huge competition there. But Hustlers just got some really rave reviews coming out of Toronto last night. And it looks fantastic. I'm hearing buzz for Jennifer Lopez Oscar nomination on Hustlers. Constance Wu apparently is fantastic too. So it's going to have a little bit of competition there. But I think it's this kind of cruise. Cruise is like 227. I would say my guess for domestic run would be 220 to 240, somewhere in that range. And I think, at the end of the day, like I said, it's going to be slightly profitable, but not a huge win for Warner Brothers. Another thing that it has done, and Deadline mentioned this too, is this excessive in that post Labor Day slot that is now owned by horror movies and will probably for the rest of my life, hopefully. Post Labor Day is now a horror weekend. We had The Nun last year. We have, and it's Warner Brothers New Line owns that weekend for horror movies. The next 3 years, they have something slated. The films aren't even announced yet. They probably haven't made them yet or greenlit them, but they're like, we own this weekend for a horror movie, which is kind of cool to see because it does really feel like the start to fall and autumn. And we kind of cruise into the Halloween season in about a month. And that's like my favorite holiday, my favorite genre's horror. So like, I'm super excited about that. So it has really changed the ball game overall, and It Chapter 2 continues that success. to a lesser degree. Okay, so Chapter 2 is number 1. Let's talk a little bit about the rest of the top 10. Coming in at number 2 this weekend was Angel Has Fallen. Again, Lionsgate, Gerard Butler action movie. 49% drop, which is not terrible considering the huge opening for it. $6 million this weekend in its third weekend. Per theater average about $1,900. It lost some theaters because of it, I imagine. Sits at $53 million so far. Hey, look, that's not a bad performance for this movie. It had the last couple of weeks to August to itself. I think it's a good performance. It's not a home run. They're not going to make like $100 million in profit, but they're going to break even and then some for Lionsgate on Angel Has Fallen. Number 2 was Good Boys in its fourth weekend. Dropped about 43%. That's a decent drop. Made $5.4 million this weekend. Per theater average was $1,700 per theater. That sits at almost $67 million total on a budget of only $20 million. That's a big win for Universal, considering what that movie had going for it. Rated R movie. I think it was rated R, wasn't it? It was like a gross out, like one of those raunchy comedies. Yeah, it was. So produced by Seth Rogen, about a group of I guess they're teenagers who do crazy stuff. I don't know. People showed up for it. There's been a lot of talk about, this is kind of a big win for comedies and rated R comedies in general. Let's not go that far, but $67 million in its fourth weekend is a really good performance for an August release of a movie like this. There's no other way to put that. So it is a big win for Universal on that level. Number 4 is Lion King. I don't know how this movie's still sticking around, but of course, because it's Lion King, of course. 4.2 million, 39% drop, fantastic drop. It did lose a lot of theaters this weekend, about 600 theaters. Per theater average in its 8th weekend, $1,600. I mean, you cannot complain about that at all. And I'm sure Disney is not complaining about the $530 million it has made so far domestically. And obviously the budget was massive. They list the budget as $260 million. That's really high. But it doesn't matter. This thing's going to make like $400 million in profit. I mean, it was an easy bet, an easy win. And I think they kind of just blew it though. The quality of the film is not great. When is this thing going to premiere on Disney Plus? Probably next year, maybe January. So it just it's a money printing machine for Disney right now, Lion King. I just wish they would have spent more time writing a better movie and maybe producing a better film, because I don't think the final product is all that good. And I think a lot of people agree with me. But I don't even know if they care about that. They just care about their billions. Okay, so I'm having a really negative Disney slant over the I just don't like monopolies. If you listen to the summer movie recap, I went off on Disney for the last 10 minutes. I don't apologize for that, because I do feel like they are, despite the fact that they do make some great movies, they are not necessarily always a force for good in the industry. Number 5 this weekend was Overcomer. This is from Affirm. Is this the religious movie? I don't even know. $1,700 per theater. Sits at $25 in its third weekend. That's actually not that bad. And that drop's really fantastic. Yeah, this is the sports movie I talked about before. It feels like it has a Christian angle to it. Affirm Films. I'm sure that's Christian. It's about a runner, and I'm sure Jesus is involved somehow. Jesus makes her go faster. I don't know. She takes communion and runs faster. That'd be a really good story, actually. So Overcomer, that's, I thought that was not doing all that well, but $5 million production budget. It's going to make $25 million by this weekend, essentially, domestically. I don't think there's a big market for these films overseas. That's not that bad. Number 6 was Fast and Furious, Hobbs and Shaw, sticking around, 3.7 million, 42% drop, lost 600 theaters, almost 700 theaters. This one's definitely on its downward swing. In its 6th weekend, $1,600. That's not bad though per theater. It's at $164 now. But the one thing you have to remember about Hobbs and Shaw is it's more of an international film, right? So 22% right now is domestic, that 164. 77% of its total take is foreign. So it sits at 719 worldwide. This is meant for a non-US, non-Canadian audience. I mean, you have to release it here, of course, and make that $200 million, but a majority of its take is going to be outside of this region. So I think from an international perspective, I think it's doing okay. Domestically, it's not really a winner to me on that $200 million budget. It's not there, but I think internationally it's going to be where it gets all of its its profit if it does hit that profitable range. I'll have to take a closer look at that once it ends its run to see how well it actually did. Number 7 was the Peanut Butter Falcon. This one's kind of sticking around. 1,300 theaters, 25% drop. That's great. It sits at $12.2 million now in about 1,300 theaters. Per theater average is $1,700 in its fifth weekend. I'd kind of written this film off. I still am writing it off to some degree. 12 million is not that bad for a film like this, but it's not going to break out, I don't think. It's not going to be like this year's Green Book. I could be wrong about that, but I think they just released it too quickly, too wide. If you were adding 100 screens a week for the next 2 months, yeah, I can see this thing maybe breaking out. But they're already at 1,300 screens. How long can you get a movie theater to play a movie if it's 1,300 per theater that it's making, or 1,700? Probably not very long. So we'll see. That was number 7. Number 8 was Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. $2.3 million for the weekend, 55% drop. I don't know what the play was here. Are they trying to get this to squeeze it all the way through, make it last all the way till Halloween? I mean, they might. It sits at $1,000 per theater now. Lost 600 theaters. I don't think it's going to make it. But it is a good performance for the film overall. $62 million domestically on a $25 million budget. That's not too bad for Lionsgate. Surprisingly, it did pretty well, and it surprisingly isn't actually a good movie. The trailer made it look terrible, but they did a good job with it, and they've been rewarded with that high box office. But I think its days are pretty numbered here. I don't see it sticking around through mid September. Number 9 was Ready or Not, which I just caught about a little bit of. It's pretty good. It's surprisingly good, and I think it could have performed a lot better in a different sort of release schedule, or maybe with a different marketing campaign. It does feel like Disney might have buried this one to some degree. Again, anti-Disney. It's Fox Searchlight. They did a great job with casting. It was shot really well. I think this is a huge lost opportunity. It's only made $25 million domestically. If I'm seeing this film on paper and I see the trailer, I'm like, this thing can open at 30. Like, it has that feeling to it of like a breakout fun horror movie. Do 30. Not gonna do a 3x multiplier, even though it's great. It's a horror film. Maybe it gets it to like $70 million domestically. That would be my barometer for success here. And they kind of failed a really good film. So that's unfortunate. But they're not going to lose a ton of cash. $6 million production budget, $26 million so far. Probably won't make much more than 27, 28 total. Finally, and then the top 10 here, Dora and the Lost City of Gold, 2.1 million, 47% drop. Lost 690 theaters this weekend. $54 million here domestically. Let's take a worldwide on that one. $82 million worldwide. Yikes. That is not great for that film. I had thought that was going to do pretty well. But apparently the Dora the Explorer worldwide audience is not as massive as I thought it was. So not a great performance in that one. Paramount has just had a brutal summer. I hope their fall goes better. There was a lot of talk that Apple was going to buy Paramount for a while, but then it all quieted down. But now you have Apple TV coming out. They're going to need content studios. Apple can't create content on their own. Like, it takes years to do that. So they're going to have to like buy a studio where there's an infrastructure in place to create TV, to create good films. I think Netflix has learned that the hard way. Like, it's the hardest part of that business, of this entire business, is the content creation part. The marketing part is difficult, but it's not nearly as difficult as making a feature film. Think of how many people are involved and how many different sort of inputs and complexities you have to navigate. So Paramount not doing really hot this summer. They have a lot coming out in the fall from what I remember. So maybe they'll recover, but I think they were down 40% versus last summer. Dora's not helping that at all. So that's the top 10. Anything outside the top 10 to note? I did want to keep it on Brittany Runs a Marathon, because I had that really great 50K per theater average. I believe it was last weekend, maybe, or 2 weekends ago. So it has expanded to 230 theaters. Per theater average is $4,500 per theater. That's okay. It sits at 1.9 million. My expectations are a little bit tempered by that. If the per theater average is higher in like the 7, 8 range, I'd be like, wow, that's really impressive, but it's not super impressive on 230 theaters. So maybe that won't break out, but I've heard really good things about Brittany Runs a Marathon. So it does have a chance of like a low. What they are doing though is they are doing a slow rollout, which Amazon, I think, has learned that that's the way you got to do that. So they did a good job with Big Sick and Manchester by the Sea a couple of years back, or a few years back now. So they get that you can't push it out to 2,000 theaters. The thing that United Artists Releasing kept trying to do this year is Booksmart. Okay, let's do 2,300 theaters in its second weekend. That makes no sense. That was its first weekend. I'm sorry. Then they did Late Night, which I think was Amazon and United Arts releasing. So it was kind of a bizarre mix up there. Burning Runs Marathon, they're taking the right path. It may not break out, but like they're giving it a chance to break out, because you ask 90% of people in America and Canada what this movie is, they have no idea what you're talking about. A month from now, when there's article after article and tweet after tweet after tweet, maybe 70% say they don't know, right? So it's a totally different ballgame if you let this thing run for a while. But if you let it burn out and you try and do 1,000 theaters right now, it's not going to go anywhere. What else outside the top 10 can we talk about? Anything? Farewell's still hanging on there, starting to come down a bit, sitting at $17 million. I think it's a big success for that film. $17 million for a film like The Farewell is a big achievement. Linda Ronstadt, her documentary is coming out from Greenwich Films. 7 theaters, only 16,000 per theater, so that's not going to break out at all. And then I really wanted to spend a lot of time to talk about what's happening with the sort of artier films, because all the film festivals are happening now. It's really the kickoff to the season. We had Venice, Telluride, and now Toronto International Film Festival is going on right now. We have a lot of like news coming out of there. And so it's kind of the kickoff to the awards movie season. So I wanted to walk through a couple of reactions that we're hearing and a couple tidbits of news to kind of give you an update on what's happening there. I think the biggest news coming out of all of these shows right now over the last couple of weeks has been The Joker. The Joker, or just Joker, I'm sorry. It won the Golden Lion at Venice, which is a very prestigious award. The last 2 winners were Shape of Water, which went on to go to win Best Picture, and then Roma as well, which was nominated for Best Picture. Everybody thought it was going to win. So Joker is the Todd Phillips, Joaquin Phoenix comic book movie, but it's a very gritty, realistic comic book movie. There is just the buzz on this going back and forth. There's Twitter wars. I'm involved in Twitter wars about it. It's just one of those films that if you're into DCEU and comic book stuff, you're probably ecstatic that it's doing so well. You're ecstatic that it won the Golden Lion. It's really a big milestone for, I think, the comic book movie genre at large. On the other side of it, and you notice this, the critics, like from Venice was the premiere really, and there's been kind of a lot of back and forth with everybody saying it's really good is like the bottom line. It sounds like it's objectively a great, well done film. The criticism that I'm hearing, and the criticism that sort of I have, I think, in my gut about it, is that it may not be the right film at the right time. And that sounds ludicrous. It sounds like I'm some like political, I'm standing in the barricades with a hammer and sickle flag or whatever. And maybe I am on some degree. But the point I'm trying to make is that art doesn't exist in a vacuum. And when you create a film like The Joker, which is about a white dude who has a troubled relationship with his mother, who is ridiculed by society, and then he kind of loses it mentally and starts essentially a cult and starts committing antisocial crimes. You can see how, and this won't make as much sense to people outside of America, but if you are in America right now and you've lived here for a long time and you've seen what's happened over the last 5 years, you will begin to understand why The Joker makes you kind of queasy. The whole concept of the film. And another thing too to note is that the Heath Ledger Joker, which has sort of established the Joker paradigm with the character now, wasn't, that there was a huge shooting in Aurora, California in a movie theater. Guy walked in with an AR-15 to start, shot like 70 people or 50 people, killed 12. When the police caught him, his face was painted like the Joker, and he said, "I'm the Joker." So based on the Heath Ledger sort of character. Now, that's not to say that art made him commit the crimes. Nobody is saying that. Anybody who says that's an absolute idiot. But there is certain elements to the Joker's character, the sort of vigilantism, the anarchism, or like whatever you want to call it, grade school anarchism that's involved with the character is very prominent in U.S. politics right now, especially on the far right. And so I just throw it out there because it's like one of those things. It's going to be the biggest, the most talked about movie in October. The fact that it won the Golden Lion is a big, big deal. It is a stamp of approval that this film is fantastic. And we'll see how that plays out. I'm just very nervous about the movie coming out, and not because I don't think it's good or something. I'm worried about how people are going to react to it, and I'm worried that someone's going to take it too seriously and something bad's going to happen. But maybe I'm just overly sensitive and overly worried. In any event, that was a film that had a lot of it's like a mid-grade buzz. Now the buzz is a supernova. Like, this is going to be the buzziest, most hyped film of the autumn until we get to probably Christmas, until Star Wars. So I do think it's going to do quite well. The opening now, I think, I was thinking like 60, 70, but now I'm thinking 80 to over $100 million opening weekend for the Hangover director Todd Phillips. It's kind of bizarre the path his career has taken, but that is now essentially the most buzzed about film of the fall. A couple other movies that are a little bit more on the arty side, let's say. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, or not arty side, more sort of like smaller scale, I would say, less buzz. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Tom Hanks as Mr. Rogers, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes right now. Initial reactions are fantastic. Best film, maybe. Best picture, best actor, almost definitely. Tom Hanks will get a Golden Globe nom, SAG nomination, and Oscar nom for that. Look out for Waves. So this is from Trey Edward Schultz. He did It Comes at Night and Krisha. I think it's called Krisha. I haven't seen Krisha, but It Comes at Night's one of my favorite films, despite the fact that A24 completely mismarketed it and screwed the entire audience on that one. It has like a D+ cinema score because people thought it was like a supernatural thriller, like a zombie movie, and it looks like that based on the trailer. But then you get in there, it's like this paranoid, like disease film. It's so good. I mean, it's like this post-apocalyptic great film, very small film though. Not at all what people expected. I think that's why there's always been this negative reaction on that film, but I think it's a great movie. This one stars Sterling K. Brown. It's an African-American family in suburbia somewhere. Looks fantastic. Comes out from A24 November 1st. Lots of really kind of like ecstatic buzz on that. Like, this is one of the best movies I've seen. I was crying the last half of it, stuff like that. I really wish I could go to one of these film festivals at some point, hopefully. What else was in the festival circuit here? Jojo Rabbit. This is the Nazi satire movie that I guess Fox was putting out. I don't know when it's coming out. That got good reactions. Ad Astra had decent reactions, it seemed like. I think some people thought it was a little bit meandering. 84% Rotten Tomatoes right now. I don't know if the responses were not ecstatic enough to push that into a Best Picture or even a Best Actor nomination for Brad Pitt. But it wasn't bad. It didn't tank or anything like that. Hustlers premiered last night at Toronto. It is opening next weekend. It's a perfect sort of time frame for that movie to premiere at Toronto, get that buzz, and then next weekend's coming out. STX, I think, is going to be very happy with the results. Jennifer Lopez, Constance Wu. I think this is a huge winner. I don't know what I put in my thought movie preview. Let's see if I can look it up real quick. The guesses were like $20 million to $28 million of the projections. I'm thinking it's going to go higher than that. I think it's going to do about 32 opening weekend and close out maybe 90 or $100 million. I think it's going to be one of the biggest films that STX puts out, and they really need a win. But a lot of good buzz from that one. Look out for Marriage Story. Noah Baumbach, Scarlett Johansson, Adam Driver starring, 100% Rotten Tomatoes. This is more or less a box office film and more an awards film only. You're going to see Best Actress, Best Actor nominations for this. Maybe a Best Film, maybe Best Director for Noah Baumbach. He's had a lot of good films. You know, I didn't like his earlier stuff. Squid and the Whale, absolutely hated that movie so much. But his more recent stuff has been very good. And I think this could be like his magnum opus, if you will. I hate to use that term, but it does fit here. So look out for Marriage Story in terms of awards. Breakout box office, not going to happen. Way too stolid of a film. Pain and Glory, it's already opened up in Spain. This is Antonio Banderas sort of his comeback. It's not really a comeback film, but like Antonio Banderas has always been this guy, you know, ever since the early to mid 90s, a big movie star, especially in the 90s. He faded a bit, I feel like, in the 2000s. But this feels like, I don't want to say swan song, but it does kind of feel like one of those moments where you realize, oh, like Antonio Banderas is like a really good actor. We never took him that seriously, but now he's showing his chops. And I think this one has a 95% Rotten Tomatoes with a lot of reviews. It's already opened up in Spain. This one's coming out from Sony Picture Classics here in the US on October 4th. Again, box office potential, not huge there, but awards, absolutely. It has a chance. Uncut Gems from the Safdie brothers. Remember they did Good Time a couple years back, which is one of my favorite films of the decade. I mean, that movie is just kinetic. And it's unforgettable when you see it. And the ending is just like, what just happened? Really good film. Adam Sandler is the lead here as a sort of diamond merchant in the Diamond District of New York. It looks really good. Great reactions so far. 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Not a lot of reviews, but it has premiered, so good buzz on that. I don't know box office potential on that. That's really big. It does have the potential to break out because it is kind of one of those very exciting movies. It's not like it's not like a Marriage Story where it's people probably staring at each other being sad. This one's like, they're running through the streets in New York and stuff like that. There's a lot going on. So it does have a chance to break out box office. I don't think it's going to. Good Time didn't do anything. But I do see a best actor nom for Adam Sandler, probably. The one with a lot of box office potential here is Knives Out, Rian Johnson's new film. I mean, it's got everybody in it. Daniel Craig, Jamie Lee Curtis, Chris Evans, Don Johnson, Michael Shannon, Toni Collette. This is his first movie after Last Jedi, which was very successful despite all the fanboy hate for it. 100% Rotten Tomatoes. Every response I heard from Toronto, I think it was last night or the night before it premiered, has just been like, this is one of the most fun films I've ever seen in my life. I guess it's like a murder mystery type film. That one I think has a ton of potential to do well at the box office. What else is coming out? The festivals. Personal History of David Copperfield, Dev Patel, 90% Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know. Box office potential, maybe a couple award noms, but it reminds me of a film you'd see in the 90s that's Oscar bait. I just don't think it's going to pull off all that much. On some smaller films, Honey Boy, the Shia LaBeouf auto biopic. I don't know what that's going to do. I don't know if it's got any awards potential. It looks totally bizarre, like Shia usually does stuff like that, but it does have a chance. The Report, Adam Driver, Annette Bening. I think this is about Torture Report, kind of like a spotlight movie, journalism, noir, thriller. One of my favorite genres. But I don't think it's going to break out all that much, or I don't even see a lot of awards contention. Maybe screenplay, adapted screenplay. Just Mercy is getting a lot of buzz. Michael B. Jordan, Jamie Foxx. I don't know much about this one, but I think it's like a legal drama about someone on death row based on a true story. I've heard people like just shouting like this after the end of the movie, like it was so good. And so that has a lot of potential, I think, to break out a bit. Bad Education, about what is that, like a cheating scandal in schools, with Hugh Jackman. That looks okay. Judy, I hear, is decent, but not going to break out. Probably, maybe a stretch would be a Best Actress nom for Renee Zellweger. She plays Judy Garland. And then finally, kind of the movie, another one, last one here, Lucy in the Sky. Natalie Portman plays an astronaut who comes back from being out in space. And this one's all over the place. Noah Hawley did this one. He did, obviously, the TV show Fargo, which is, I think, very good. And also did Legion on FX, which a lot of people like. Lucy in the Sky just seems like a total wild card. I have no idea what that thing's going to do. I don't think there's going to be an audience for it, but it might. It seems like one of those films that like the film letterbox, the film Twitter people might love, and that could push it into awards contention, but I kind of doubt that too. So of all the films that I've heard about the last few weeks at these festivals, I think box office wise, Hustlers, which isn't really an arty film, but like whatever, premiered at Toronto, so it counts. I think it's going to do very well. Joker is now stratospheric in terms of hype. And I really do think Knives Out got a great reaction the last couple of days in Toronto, so I think that's going to do quite well. But I'm excited. I love award season. It's like it's so much fun to follow this stuff. There's not like a ton of the box office to talk about it, but it's a whole different. It's essentially a different tier. Success for a movie like this, like The Farewell, did what, $17 million? That's a big success for a film like that. Huge success. Midsommar doing 26. Hey, that's not that bad. For a movie like that, one of the strangest movies I've ever seen in my life. So we're still talking about box office, but it's just a different sort of league, essentially. And success is measured in a completely different way. In any event, let's quickly, no time machine this week. Chris will be back next week with his segment. Looking forward to that. Let's talk a little bit about what's going to come out in the next few weeks. If you haven't listened, I did a summer movie review last weekend. I'm posting that like once a day. Also the fall preview as well. So if you didn't have a chance to listen to that, it's a lot of fun. Listen to those episodes. They're up on YouTube and wherever I post this thing at. Next weekend we have Goldfinch and Hustlers. Again, Hustlers, I almost bet $100 is going to break out really well. Any limited stuff next weekend that I'm seeing that looks interesting? Not really. And then we have Ad Astra, Downton Abbey, Rambo Last Blood. Of those, I don't think Ad Astra is going to do very well. Downton Abbey, I just don't think there's a huge audience anymore for that show that ended like 4 years ago. In TV to film, it doesn't work all the time. Rambo Last Blood, watch for that one. Kind of a sleeper. I don't think like $30 million opening, but I think it could do 20s or something like that. It looks like a good movie. Still, I'm so old, but I think there's people like my age and older who like that stuff, so they might go and see it. And then the rest of September's really quiet. It's a weird September. Abominable comes out. That looks really good for a children's film. It looks like a really good story, really fascinating sort of drawings. I guess it's computer animation, whatever. The visuals look great. I think that could do pretty well. And then we're into Joker. And then we're Joker territory. That's like all the first 2 weeks, it feels like, of October will be like Joker. Also, Lucy in the Sky and Pain and Glory also come out limited on the 4th. That's all I have for today, folks. Thank you for listening. This has been the Wildline Podcast. I will be back next week, and we will talk about Goldfinch and Hustlers and how they did the box office. Thank you.